Our nation is overcome with shock, horror, and sorrow.
Calls for action rang out time and again in 2019 as mass acts of violence punctuated the year. They prompted law enforcement agencies in every corner of the country to prepare for the worst.
We have at least 5 victims, people who were senselessly murdered.
And local advocates to join hands for change.
That we can only conquer hatred by love and by unity.
All as the debate wages on over what impact policies and legislation can have.
We are outraged and sickened.
Tonight, we go beneath the headlines and dive into the issues that matter to our communities and keep our families safe and secure at home.
We are blessed. We are blessed because we're alive.
And we vow to act with urgent resolve.
How do we confront this problem? This is Open for Discussion. Violence around us.
Good evening, I'm Hope Sisk. As we have followed the news of large-scale acts of violence this year, we've seen a troubling timeline for our country. 5 dead in a bank in Sebring, Florida, 12 dead in a municipal building in Virginia Beach, in El Paso, Texas, and Dayton, Ohio, 31 people killed less than 14 hours apart. And when it happened in our own backyard this April, 4 people killed on a Monday morning in Mandan. Law enforcement investigated, the community mourned, people paid tribute, and we all stopped to ask, how could this happen? And why did it happen? They're big questions, but tonight we attempt to answer them. We've pulled together a handful of the most experienced and passionate people in the state working to build healthier communities and safer homes. This is a program not for political debate. We're not here to sensationalize moments of tragedy. This is an opportunity to learn from them and get our neighbors talking about what we can all do to make our home a safer place. Max Grossfeld gets us started.
While violence can take many forms, tonight we're going to focus on large-scale acts. Before we can break down the issues, first we have to know what we're talking about. That can prove difficult as even the federal government contradicts itself. In the wake of the Sandy Hook massacre, where 28 people, including the gunman, died, Congress said any event where 3 or more people die is a mass killing. The FBI, however, defines mass murder as an event in which someone kills at least 4 people. For example, only 3 victims died and 17 people got hurt at the Garlic Festival shooting in Gilroy, California. While Congress does consider this a mass shooting, the FBI doesn't, despite 20 casualties. Further muddying the debate, the FBI doesn't count the attacker among the dead if he was killed during the attack, meaning if he was the 4th to die, it wouldn't be considered a massacre. This was the case in Gilroy. None of these definitions take weapons into account. The Congressional Research Service uses the FBI's definition for a mass shooting, so it doesn't take into account incidents where fewer than 4 people died. The obvious flaw in this measurement is the death qualifier. Some researchers, like the Gun Violence Archive, believe if 4 people are shot, it should be considered a mass shooting regardless of the death total. Using the CRS definition, researchers say the U.S. averaged slightly more than 20 mass shootings per year between 1999 and 2013 for a total of 317 incidents. Using the GVA definition, there have already been 358 mass shootings in 2019 alone. This massive variation in numbers can create some confusion, but it shouldn't overshadow the underlying problem. More than 34,000 people have died by guns this year. Most of those deaths are by suicide.
Many of us think of North Dakota as a safe place to live, and for the most part, law enforcement agrees. And yet many of the men and women who put their lives on the line every day to protect and serve say the conversation in their departments and agencies is changing from if a tragedy happens to when it happens. Crime reporter Daniela Hurtado breaks down how communities and officers have had to adapt and whether we'll ever be fully prepared.
Our flag symbolizes many things, like valor, vigilance, and perseverance. The nation's foundation is built on fundamentals seen daily and after tragedies that plague our societies.
We don't know how many people have been hurt.
But communities changing can't be ignored.
The world's changing.
I'm 41 years old, and
What brought us to Orlando?
20, 30 years ago, you didn't have all of this stuff.
Law enforcement is seeing shifts in society firsthand.
Things are getting more violent, more scary. Things are happening that you just really didn't think of before.
Officers have had to adapt.
New tactics are deployed by bad people, so we have to change our tactics.
Annual active shooter and assailant trainings for officers and deputies across the state is the new normal. In fact, it was implemented years ago. Recently, agencies in our area began ALICE training with schools.
Can I say that we're ever going to be 100% prepared? No, but what I can say is that we're prepared the best to react the best we can under any situation thrown in front of us.
Similar to the situation first responders walked into on April 1st in Mandan, when they found the scene of a quadruple homicide. It's something officers train for and brace for their entire careers. But hope it never happens.
It's something that every law enforcement officer fears.
A feeling shared by many across the state.
It saddens me because nowadays you just got people going around shooting kids, shooting people.
Studies show that in America, mass shootings are becoming deadlier. Some of the worst by the numbers. 58 people killed during a concert in Las Vegas in 2017. A year prior, 49 killed at Pulse nightclub in Orlando. In 2007, 32 dead at Virginia Tech. 26 in Sutherland Springs 10 years after, and 26 murdered at Sandy Hook in 2012.
Hard to keep track of all of them.
A sad reality. Many remember Columbine as the incident that brought mass shootings to the forefront.
It seemed like after that happened, it just took off. And it was a slow progression, but now we're at where we are today.
The Dayton and El Paso shootings are some of the most recent, where dozens were murdered. Communities grasping onto hope.
Did not deserve to lose their life. They had children.
But wondering how it happened in their town.
Anything can happen at any time, at any place, anywhere in this world, anywhere in this country, anywhere in this state. So don't take it for granted just because we're here, we haven't had something happen, that nothing is going to happen.
Situations some say need solutions.
Nothing we could do to stop it until we get better security measures or better help to help them out and get them the stuff that they need.
As flags go half-staff once more out of respect for another tragedy impacting our society, people wonder what will make it stop. In Bismarck, I'm Daniela Hurtado for Your News Leader.
We have Mandan Police Chief Jason Ziegler and School Resource Officer Mike Bride with us in the studio now for more on this topic. So thanks to both of you for coming to join us and be part of this discussion. The state of North Dakota population growth rise, that is growing faster than any other state in the country. Working in law enforcement, are you seeing an impact on that?
Absolutely. The biggest impact of us is our calls for service goes up, and then the case reports that we have to investigate, everything comes to us, and we're kind of the hub of everything. And so the impact is, yes, there is a huge impact to us. It's always a struggle for manpower. The recruitment of good employees and good police officers is always going to be, as communities grow, is always going to be an issue.
We're running out of room. We don't have enough rooms. As you look into mental health issues too, I know there's more rooms being used for mental health and less classrooms being able to be a full classroom like a math class. So essentially we're running out of room in the schools too as the population grows in town.
I'm a resident of Mandan myself. We tend to think of it as a small town community, a small town feel. And that sense really sort of shifted this last spring when you had a major homicide investigation going on. Looking back on that time, you had national media sort of flocking to the area to cover the conversation. So my question to you is, the media, we're part of it too, we're part of that equation. How does it help you and how does it hurt you?
One of the struggles with law enforcement is we can only release so much stuff at certain times. So it does become a kind of a task trying to keep you guys up to speed on things. The most important media to me is our local media. The national media will be here and they'll leave, but we all live in the same community. We all have the same interests. So we cannot forget our local media in these, and you guys should be the spotlight when it comes to stories like that. We were pretty blessed during that situation that everybody was working together and that we forged a very, very good relationship with all of our local media. And the information, I know there was some tenuous times there that where, people were wanting information, but there's just things that we can't release and there's things that we can, and it's very time sensitive. We also got to think about the families that were involved and everything else when we do stuff like that. Where it hurts us is if you get somebody that goes rogue. They just want to print their own things, or they want to report their own things, or they go Facebook Live and everybody seems to be a news reporter because they have immediate access to the internet. And misinformation gets out there, the wrong information gets out there. So we worked really hard during that time to make sure that my PIO and all the staff that was around me helping me with that stuff worked really hard to get the message out there. Unless you hear it from myself, the chief of police, it's not true.
Trust with police officers, especially building that trust among our youth. Do you think that is an important job to be taking on at this point in our country?
It's huge. I've seen it tenfold for me and my benefit. We've had a suicidal subjects where it's been a high schooler and patrols down there, and they're just not opening up to that patrolman. They won't talk to him. I walk in the room and they're like, "Hey, there's Officer Bride," and they come walking right over to me, and they spew exactly how they're feeling, and then we can get them the help they need. And I've seen that on multiple occasions with things.
This is a lot of responsibility. How much of it falls on our law enforcement officers, but what responsibility do the schools, do the families at home have?
I think everybody has responsibility in this. We're a community because everyone has their role to play. I'm just as important as a parent at home telling them right from wrong. I'm just as important as a teacher teaching them math, teaching them science, teaching them health, career type stuff, whatever it might be. Just as an administrator, being there when they need help with instruction and everything.
You can get involved in this conversation on social media by using the hashtag #NDOpenForDiscussion. So far this year, we've seen a lot of discussion surrounding who can own guns or how and why a person was able to get their hands on them. Besides federal regulations, some states have also enacted their own rules surrounding firearms, sometimes in response to those tragedies, while some states are looking at new laws. Megan Hoffman takes a closer look at the Second Amendment and its role in America.
There are few things that can divide opinions as quickly as the sound of a gunshot, especially when it comes to mass shootings.
We believe in the Second Amendment, but we believe the Second Amendment can sit comfortably alongside common sense gun laws.
Those who identify themselves as advocates for the Second Amendment have a different view.
It turns due process on its head. It removes constitutional protections that every U.S. citizen is afforded under the Constitution.
What the Second Amendment means is a constant debate. After dozens of Supreme Court rulings, many still have differing views on what the Constitution provides U.S. citizens and how much guns can or can't be regulated. There are dozens of laws about who can own a gun, how many rounds, and how quickly the ammunition can be discharged, and where you can carry them.
There are so many ways that they can come and take your guns without due process.
Gun rallies like this are working against more regulation, like red flag laws. Those would allow law enforcement or family members to petition courts to have guns temporarily taken away from someone who could be a danger to themselves or someone else.
These red flag laws, while they're well-intentioned in the concept, are a very bad idea from a constitutional perspective and a practical perspective.
While groups like Moms Demand Action hold their own events fighting for that type of law.
We think that it's reasonable that families and law enforcement should, through a rigorous due process, be able to temporarily take away someone's guns or take away their access to guns until they are deemed to be safe again.
The Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives Agency is responsible for enforcing both state and federal gun laws. ATF agents in North Dakota say they've seen every type of firearm you can think of, but handguns are the most common. And when it comes to shootings, they say handguns are used the most. That lines up with national data as well. 2018 statistics from the FBI show of the 14,000 plus homicides, more than 10,000 involved firearms, with 6,600 being handgun related. The ATF says they also see gun modifications, which can make a firearm shorter and easier to conceal.
Modifying these guns without the proper permits, they're not licensing them properly, they're not paying their tax stamps, and they're cutting the barrels off, and they become very short. And then with that, it makes it able to better conceal them and then use them in commission of crimes such as, shooting at law enforcement or robbing each other.
After shootings, people also say background checks need to be strengthened. The Brady Handgun Violence Prevention Act of 1993 mandates background checks on firearm purchasers. Between November 1998 and December 2018, more than 304 million transactions have been processed by the National Instant Criminal Background Check System, according to the FBI. For unlicensed sellers, the checks aren't required.
Some thieves target firearms because they know that it's an easy, quick sale. A lot of times they can sell them or trade them for drugs, or they can just sell them to other people very quickly.
There's one thing most do agree on. A May Quinnipiac poll showed 94% of those surveyed in support of stricter background checks. A July poll from NPR PBS NewsHour and Marist showed 89% support. But there's no answer that satisfies everyone. I'm Megan Hoffman reporting for your news leader.
A red flag bill was introduced in the North Dakota legislature this past session. It was voted down 76-17 in the House. 17 states and the District of Columbia have enacted some form of a red flag law. As for stricter background checks, a bill passed in the U.S. House in February, but has not yet been introduced in the Senate.
That President Kennedy died at approximately 1 o'clock Central Standard Time, which is about 35 minutes ago.
We bring you this program on the 56th anniversary of the assassination of President John F. Kennedy.
The car of the President of the United States, surrounded by Secret Service men.
It was a moment that stands out in American history as a public act of violence that stung at the hearts of men, women, and children everywhere. President Kennedy said in his inaugural address, "All this will not be finished in the first 100 days, nor in the first 1,000 days, nor in the life of this administration, nor even perhaps in our lifetime on this planet. But let us begin." So here we begin, a discussion we hope this community will carry on. Answers may not come easily or quickly, but we know they will not come if we are not seeking them. Many believe mental health could play a role in some of the violent attacks that have happened around the country. Until this year, North Dakota has not tracked correlations of mental health and violence in North Dakota. Jordan Verdadero met with an epidemiologist for the state on how it is now tracking that information.
In the United States, 7 people per hour die of violent death, according to the CDC. In 2017, more than 19,500 people died by homicide, and 47,000 people died by suicide. North Dakota has witnessed its share of violent deaths too. This public health problem led to the CDC creating the National Death Reporting System to track all types of violent deaths throughout the different states.
This isn't a new program. It actually existed back in 2002. And North Dakota has always had interest in applying for this program, or for this funding to run this program, but we didn't have the resources available or staff available.
Pink says North Dakota was one of 10 states that wasn't a part of the reporting system. Now all 50 states are. It includes data elements that provide context about violent deaths such as relationship problems, mental health problems and treatment, toxicology results, and life stressors. It also provides information about the incidents like the weapons used, characteristics of suspects, and locations where they happened.
And with that, we are collecting information on specific types of deaths. And those deaths are suicides, homicides, unintentional firearm deaths, unknown intent, legal intervention, and terrorism.
The goal is to combine information from all frontline investigators in a systematic manner to provide a complete picture.
The North Dakota Violent Death Reporting System will help inform leadership, policymakers, program planners on the trends and patterns that we're seeing in regards to violent deaths. It will help educate our communities.
According to the CDC, this is the only state-based surveillance system that pulls data on violent deaths and their circumstances from multiple sources into one anonymous database. The DOH started officially collecting data in the state on January 1st of this year, and the information so far is very preliminary. But if you feel like someone could pose a threat to the community, the North Dakota Safety Council offers training for violence prevention.
Since 1999, the amount of attacks in schools, churches, and the workplace have all increased at about the same pace. So we offer training for those three areas, specifically about what they can do to mitigate their risk that something happens in their church, their workplace, or their school.
NDSC says it wants individuals to practice an emergency response plan and to be prepared in your current environment. And there could be a way to pick up on warning signs, like something that causes a major impact on a life.
Part of the awareness is when we have a coworker or we have an employee that's going through a bad divorce, a custody battle, a home foreclosure, something like that that's going to have a major impact on them or their family. What can we offer as an employer to help them through that process and recognize that this is a very stressful time for them?
Mosman says it's important to understand North Dakota has changed. Mosman says you can lower your risk at the front end through prevention and make sure there is a plan in place in case violence knocks at your door.
We're going to take a closer look at the mental health component to this conversation with some help from the Executive Director of Mental Health America of North Dakota. Carlotta McClary is joining us now in the studio to talk more about it, and we appreciate you making some time to come in. As I told you earlier, this has been an area of this conversation that I personally have had a lot of education, personal education about. There's a lot of misconception out there, and for you working in the mental health field throughout your career, I'm wondering if you can shed some light on whether you feel that mental illness is a factor in this really complex discussion that we're having about violence in our communities.
And I would say that there really isn't any proneness for somebody who has mental illness to be any more violent than the general public. So there is no correlation between mental illness and the violence.
What would you say the urgency needs to be on when we go to address these problems?
We really need to take a look at the violent society that we live in. And, typically we've got issues with discrimination, you've got ethnic discrimination as well as racial discrimination and conflict. There's abuse of women, children, the elders in our community, and weaker members of our society. There's a decline in community engagement and family connections. And so that really are the root causes, we believe, in the violence that we experience here in the United States.
As these conversations go on about blaming mental illness for these incidents, are creating a stigma around it that's maybe more hurtful to our communities.
And certainly when you do create stigma around mental illness, you're going to cause people not to seek help, to isolate more, and not really be part of society. You're going to get policies that are not really meant to address the true root causes of what's happening in our society around the violence. And so you're going to have policies that are ill-fitted and could actually cause more harm to individuals with mental health issues. We know that if people receive access to the care that they need, even in that very small percentage, that will be able to take care of the issues around that, around violence and those kinds of things. So people need access to care, and in a community that will stigmatize them, that is often not what happens.
Tell us what you think on social media. Use the hashtag #NDOpenForDiscussion. The impact of what you see or play online may not be your first thought when opening an app or grabbing a controller, but experts say what people expose themselves to online has the potential for detrimental side effects. Emmeline Ivy reports.
It's the age of electronic technology. Psychiatrists say more and more people are engaging in online gaming and social media.
It's most of my day. Every time that I have a break or something during school, I go on them and just check everything.
At least probably about 15 hours average.
Over time, those hours can translate into more than just gaming or scrolling through posts online. Psychiatrist Kevin Damon says what we do and how we interact online can affect our headspace and actions in real life.
I think it's made our generation sick a lot of the times because we don't understand how to be ourselves anymore. And that has made a lot of impacts on where we go, what we do, and how we live our lives.
Go onto Instagram and post it.
Experts say time online can evoke potentially dangerous and violent habits among users.
The more violence that you watch, the more violence you participate, the more violence you're going to be. I mean, there's over 5,000 studies out there. They're very, very clear. The more violence that you watch, the more violent you'll become.
While some gamers believe there might not be any link between violent video games and their tendencies,
Absolutely not. No. Well, no, there's no way. It doesn't influence me whatsoever. I get more competitive, I guess.
Dr. Damon says there's a connection.
You take a look at statistics, there's been about a 500% increase in the amount of assaultive behaviors over the last 30 years. That's right about the same time that violent video games have come out. So the amount of violence that we watch is directly correlated with the amount of violence that we do.
Dr. Damon says when you do something for hours at a time, you begin to model that. The best way to combat this is to monitor what you expose yourself to online. In Bismarck, I'm Emmeline Ivy for your News Leader.
The impacts on our youth, certainly an important component of this conversation. We're going deeper into that conversation right now with some help from educators and leaders in the education community around us. We've got Bismarck Public Schools Superintendent Dr. Jason Hornbacher here with us, as well as Simley Middle School Principal Russ Reel. Thank you both for making some time to come in and talk to us. Let's start by getting a big picture. Bismarck Public Schools, tell us what's at work in those schools to address behavioral health.
I think Bismarck Public Schools made mental health and behavioral health a priority when they hired me 7-8 months ago. It's been a long-standing work of a lot of people in this district. I would say that Bismarck Public Schools has been working on behavioral health for over 10 years.
I think it all starts with relationships, you know, and the relationships have to start at the classroom level, but they also have to be throughout your building, whether it's your custodians, whether it's in your kitchen, whether it's the secretaries. Everybody has a role. And so our job is to have things in place. So for example, in our school, we have a second steps curriculum. It's a social emotional piece where students have prompts and they have to think through these scenarios. How are you going to handle friendship changes? How are you going to handle bad news? And putting kids in that real life situation so they have time to process that and massage that. So I think that is really critical for our schools to really look at that, and that starts with core instruction with like I said, everyone. So not just a select group of teachers, but all teachers.
If you scale that up just one layer, those relationships within the community are so important. Leveraging our mental health providers, our law enforcement, our first responders, to really support schools and support kids. Behavioral health is one of those things that it's not a school issue, it's a community issue. And as a community, I think we've rallied around the notion of we need to do something collectively and together for students and for teachers.
But what impact do you have when those students go home for the day? They go back to their families. What would you say to parents to get them encouraged to get involved in this?
We know that collectively, with parents' help, we will serve our children much, much better. So reaching out to your teachers, establishing that conversation, reaching out to your administrators, reaching out to the school counselors. You know, we have an increase we hired more counselors, social workers, and school psychologists this past year. So we have a committed board that's really interested in providing more services to kids. But if you're that parent that you know something about your child and you want somebody to know, sit down, have a conversation with the school counselor. Let them know so that we know how to support your child right from the very beginning, that very first day.
And we really need to listen to our kids. Students have way more information that they're willing to share if we just set the stage.
If we can get back to a little bit more peer interaction that is less prescribed, I think that might be part of our solution.
But our teachers have so much of that responsibility, and they're already under quite a bit of pressure in their day-to-day jobs. What can we do as a community to support them in what they're doing?
They are so professional and they are so dedicated to our students. So we just have to, as a community, trust our teachers, and we have to continue to earn that trust, But we will absolutely, you know, as a community of people, not just teachers, parents, educators, but of people, we will really move this forward.
And one of the things that we need to do in Bismarck schools is to make sure that we continue to not put too much on our teachers' plates, to find things that we can alleviate that they have to do on a daily basis. And we're engaged in that work, and we're really hoping that 2021, well, I should say we're not hoping, we are planning for 2021 being a year where we're really zeroed in on what we need to do to help teachers.
Thank you for joining us tonight. We encourage you at home to carry on these topics of conversation in your own circles so this discussion doesn't end here. Good night.